It is the silent star of so many movies and films from Hampton Roads. We'll examine how local filmmakers use the power of the big screen to capture the heart of Hampton Roads waterways. This is What Matters.
See you later!
Good evening, I'm Kathy Lewis. It turns out the world's largest natural harbor is a movie star, and it doesn't even have an agent. Tonight we consider Hampton Roads Waterways as a movie set, with two producers who found it to be a very agreeable star, and one advocate who's trying to be sure it stays that way. Joining us tonight, Kat Moon, who's produced a documentary called Crab Feast or Famine, and Sally Dickinson, who's the producer of Our Island Home, along with Christy Everett, who's with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. But before we get to our discussion, let's take a look at some of the ways our region's waterways have played on the silver screen over the years. We spoke with the head of the Hampton Roads Film Office, Jeff Frizzell.
The water has always been very attractive to filmmakers for this area. The origin of the name Hampton Roads is where it all comes in, the waterways, and we've had projects like Mission Impossible 3, Navy SEALs.
I'm sorry, guys, but I cannot be a part of this funeral procession. I'm out of here.
See you later!
Virus with Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Sutherland.
I'm picking up a contact. 12 miles out, speed 0 knots. It's dead in the water, but it's big. It's really big.
Hey, is there anyone aboard?
In fact, sometimes things are spur off of other things, like they did Virus, and they used one of the ships out of the James River Ghost Fleet. A couple years ago, a show called Shipwreckers brought it out and did a documentary because they took that same ship that they used in that movie to the Keys to sink as a reef. So much water in this area, I think some of it has never been used. One of the Message in a Bottle that was the Paul Newman movie with Kevin Costner and Robin Wright tried to film on Tangier Island, and they said they weren't interested in Hollywood coming. Tangier is a very small community, and they're still, practicing the ways they did years ago. So those kind of opportunities, a lot of those areas have not been used, and they're beautiful. We used Back Bay last year and the Atlantic Ocean for Ish Safari, which was basically a kid's version of Survivor that came over here from Dubai. And they did a bunch of challenges in the water, both on the bay and on the ocean side. And it's great having that proximity where in the morning you can see the sun coming up on one side, and in the evening you can see the sun going down on the bay. It's not many places in the world you can get both of those shots in the same day, 300 yards apart. Chincoteague is fantastic. It's in fact, there's a documentary that is being bannered about doing on the pony swim, and the Virginia Film Office is working closely with that group. And if you've never been up there, it's quite a sight to see those guys, swimming across from the island and onto the mainland. There's been a lot of big films that I mentioned come in and film in this area, but a lot of small films, commercial work, documentaries also come in. Kat Moon just did a project about the watermen in the Chesapeake Bay. The thing about the bay is, there's no location fee. I mean, people can go out there and it's wide open. The companies can come in and use the waterways. They can use the Chesapeake Bay or the James River, the Elizabeth River, and they don't have to close streets. They don't have to close sidewalks. They don't have to inconvenience local businesses, but they're still spending money.
No, we're bushwhacking, if you're not too scared. A lot of people say there's some serious swamp magic out here. Say you never really leave the swamp. Part of you always stays forever.
Still renting hotel rooms, they're still renting equipment, they're still hiring local crew, creating jobs and significant economic impact without having to tie up everyday services that the community may use. The waterways are beautiful, and there's a lot of history here and a lot of things that filmmakers, whether they're big or small, can take advantage of, and I think they should do that.
Well, while the filmmaking may continue, the film office, the Hampton Roads Film Office, has closed as of June 30th. Jeff Frizzell, whom you just saw in that tape, is apparently continuing it on a volunteer basis. It's one of those unfortunate outgrowths of the economic crisis. But the Hampton Roads Film Office reports that annually, production in Hampton Roads counts for about $124 million in economic impact and $9 million in direct state tax revenue. This is probably the first year in quite some time where there are some even more significant tax incentives for filmmakers, and we're glad to have a couple of them with us tonight. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Kat Moon, this business of using the Chesapeake Bay and being able, as Jeff said, to shoot the sunrise and turn around by the end of the day and shoot the sunset, that must be really meaningful for a filmmaker.
It is. I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather be.
Really?
It's beautiful, and I don't know what else to say.
Yeah,
but
that's enough. You were a recent graduate of Regents Film School, just having finished, yeah? I mean, really just having finished. And one of the great things about that film school is they really throw you into it. They really, you will come out of there having been around a camera and a set quite a lot.
Right. You really you get what you put into it, and if you really show ambition, they really push you and help you get you prepared and give you a good base to go out there and work in the world.
So you came out of there with a documentary called Crab Feast or Famine, which has done pretty well considering this was a project you did as a student. It's done really well.
It was my senior project.
Yeah.
And I just had a big vision. It was a calling, and I really wanted to tell the story about the watermen in the Chesapeake Bay, and just really about being stewards of the earth and preserving the crab. Used to come here when I was a kid, 12 years old, with my family, and from the Shenandoah Valley, and I saw the Chesapeake, and I fell in love. And I think it bit me as an adult, and ended up moving here and falling in love with the bay and watermen.
Yeah, and so the story that you've told is about the complex interweb that happens when we try to do some regulation to help the crab supplies, and the impact that has on individual watermen.
Well, I spent a lot of time with watermen, and the conflict was that the watermen said, we see plenty of crab out here. How can you tell us there's no crab? You know, sometimes, you know, it's like crabs, you never know where they're going to be. They're going to be over here or over there, but how do you count crabs? And then we have the scientists that are saying, but we have a shortage of crabs. We need to have regulations. And then we have government officials saying, you know, well, we have to, you know, make sure that there's more crab for, you know, for the future. And then you have the other issue where you have the conservation, where you have the Chesapeake Bay, and you know that it's a beautiful place, but it's not one of the dirtier waters. It's not a clean place. So it's all these different conflicts in telling that story.
Yeah. And of course, at the end of the day, it all has an impact on people who are trying to earn a living. So here's a clip from Crab Feast or Famine.
I've lived on the Chesapeake Bay all my life. It's my home. It's a vast, rich ecosystem. Provides home for numerous species of plants and animals. It's a place that meets freshwater rivers. It's the largest estuary that lies off the Atlantic Ocean. For 400 years, my ancestors have crabbed and fished in the bay. My daddy was a waterman, and his daddy was a waterman. We have a proud tradition, and we work hard. My day generally starts before daylight. That makes for a long day. I do love being on the water. At 52 years old, I can't imagine doing anything else. Being a waterman ain't what it used to be. So much has changed from when I was a boy out fishing with my dad. The oysters are nearly gone, and crabs are at all-time low. The fact is, the crab catch in the Chesapeake Bay has dropped over 70% in the last 10 years. Maryland and Virginia.
Wow. And this is the story of one person's experience with this. Christy Everett, you're with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and I know that you know some of these stories, and it's pretty tough to watch a story about an industry and what's happening to it, but understand that there's a different perspective about it and a larger picture.
Right, and I think filmmaking is really helpful to bring awareness to bay issues. The biggest problem with the bay is too much nutrient pollution. Though people don't really know that, there's not a lot of awareness about that. It's happened slowly over time. It's not as dramatic, say, as an oil spill. And when you talk to people about nutrient pollution, they tend to doze off. It's not the most exciting topic. So to be able to show either beautiful shots of the bay, to remind them this is something in our backyard, but it's an amazing treasure. But it does have problems, and in the film you refer to the fish kills that we had in downtown Norfolk, and that's compelling enough so people realize, gosh, the bay is out of balance. So it tells a message much better than just science or jargon or words can. So it's a very helpful tool for us.
Good. Sally Dickinson, tell us about Our Island Home.
Well, Our Island Home came out of an oral history project that we were doing at the Barrier Island Center, going out and interviewing people that used to live out on Virginia's Barrier Islands, which was a string of islands off the coast of the eastern shore, from Chincoteague to the north and Fisherman's Island to the south. And these islands have a fascinating history to them that not many people know. There used to be communities that lived out on these islands in the last several centuries, but due to erosion and powerful hurricanes, the worst one being in 1933, it forced a lot of these communities to move off. Now, considering they were moving off in the 30s, those folks who lived on the islands are getting up there in age, and their stories are dying off. And so it was at the Barrier Island Center we decided to really make a concerted effort to go out and try to document as many people as we could who either lived on a Barrier Island or who had family. Yeah. So in 1 year we interviewed 20 people, and as we were listening to these stories, we realized that this is very compelling, and that a broader audience, the rest of Virginia, and the rest of the United States would be very interested in hearing these people's story about this vanished coastal towns and areas. So that it came out of that, and we decided to focus on 3 people for our island home who used to live on Hog Island, and it's just very heartfelt. It's interesting, when we went out to interview them again, there was very little prompting that needed to be done.
Oh, interesting.
Basically, it was tell us your name and where you were born, and they just took off. Yeah. And so what you see in the documentary is, I think that poignancy comes across.
Indeed. Well, let's take a look at a clip from Our Island Home.
Hog Island, for a lot of people, and especially those that have a connection, is such a special place. It's like a little Eden. Even though it's got huge mosquitoes and a lot of snakes and a lot of sand, but it's just something about it that keeps wanting you to go back. I've seen grown men talk about Hog Island that lived there, was born there, lived there, and had to move off. I've seen them talk about do it myself. Just get emotional, you know. Because it was a way of life that you could never reclaim. All the seafood.
There's something so powerful about a story, and it just seems that everybody has one, and they really define who we are. And still, you could see the power of that story even all these many years later.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what would I see if I came down to the Barrier Island exhibit space?
Well, first and foremost, we are a museum dedicated to preserving the artifacts and the stories of Virginia's Barrier Islands. We're also housed on a beautiful 17-acre farm, which used to be Northampton County almshouse or poorhouse. So really, we like to say we're 2 museums in one. We tell the story of almshouse and poorhouses, but the artifacts of the islands are housed in the museum.
It's very helpful for people to kind of get in touch with and understand some of the realities of life, because I can't imagine what it must have been like to live on an island, you know, because basically everything that you need has to be has to be brought out to you by boat. Absolutely. And you can tell people love that lifestyle, so it had to be something pretty significant to get them to move off the island, and as it happens, it was.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Our Island Home is, I know it's already aired on WHRO, but it's also aired around the state as well?
Yes, it has. It just recently aired in Richmond and Charlottesville area.
Wow,
so,
that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And we should note, Cat Moon, your production's already won a Telly, is that right?
Right, bronze Telly.
Does that mean that you got out of your final exam? Because I think if you win a Telly, you should get out of your final exam.
Well, that kind of happened after the exam,
oh,
so
okay.
I had to take it anyway.
So what happens for you now? I mean, you've done this documentary. You have the documentary bug?
I do. I do. I have a passion for telling people stories, and I'm teamed up with another producer, and we're working on developing a series about more stories about the Chesapeake and other groups of people like farmers and the wives and you know, different people that are affected that live on the bay, and about their stories as being stewards of the earth.
Yeah. When we think about this business of being stewards of the earth, Christy, I think it's been very impressive the degree to which you've tried to involve local watermen in some of these conversations. Not always successfully, but some watermen have been involved.
Of course, and Kat mentioned in her film how our lawsuit was a joint waterman lawsuit to the EPA to say the government has to do more, that people's livelihoods are at stake, and there's economic distress because the bay is not clean. So I think it's important to understand that we consider a clean bay a place where watermen can fish and earn a living and keep traditions alive that have been around for hundreds of years and are literally, you know, falling apart at this point and are in dire straits.
And it's interesting, too, because these regulations appear to have worked in terms of the restoration of the blue crab.
Right, we've seen blue crab numbers, according to the annual winter dredge survey, from under 300 million 2 years ago to over 650 million. So we've seen a lot of response. I think we need to do a lot more to improve water quality, and as we improve water quality, we can particularly relax the fishing regulations so we can have sustainable fisheries and, you know, more benefit for everyone in the economy.
The crab story is an interesting one because, unfortunately, and you know, this is the timing of things, while the crab market returned, or the crab supply returned, I should say, unfortunately, about half of the houses that picked the crab had gone under because of the economy. So, you know, it's such an it seems to me the water is just so interdependent. The people who make their living on it, the environment, the commerce that comes out of it. It's just kind of extraordinary how interdependent it is.
Absolutely.
So as you think about this going forward, Christy Everett, what's the next big challenge? I mean, is there something we draw out of the fact that the blue crab, that effort appears to have been successful?
Well, I think it shows that if government takes leadership stance, and Maryland and Virginia governors did in the case of crab regulations, but if they take a political risk and say, we're going to do what we feel is right for the bay, we can see success. And so crabs are one sign of quote-unquote success, though obviously there is some hardship because of it, but we need to take other action like that to improve water quality, because the bay is far from saved, and there's still a lot of folks that could do much better economically, not only watermen, but the fishing industry in the recreational sense, commercial industry beyond just watermen, the tourism industry. Tourism industry is huge in Hampton Roads, and it really could benefit greatly if we had cleaner water, clearer water, you know, have more fish here.
So, Cat Moon, as you think about this from a waterman's perspective, what did you learn about the life of a waterman that you found particularly compelling?
What I love about watermen is that they're like a farmer that tills the soil every day, and they have dedication and loyalty, and they do a hard job that most of us couldn't do. And they just have such a love and a passion for the water, and they're not out to take the last crab out of the bay. They want to see the bay, you know, be clean and they want their future generations to be able to crab on the bay, and that's all they really wanted. And
that's in some jeopardy depending on what you're talking about.
Well, the average waterman right now is 50 years old, and it's almost impossible right now, unless you buy another waterman out, it's almost impossible to get a license or permit to be able to crab. So it's not really like you and I really can't decide, hey, we're going to go into the crabbing business. Most likely we're not going to get a permit to be able to do that.
Interesting. So I wonder, as you think about this issue from what you've learned in these oral histories, what do you come away with?
I think what comes across to me is the incredible pride of their heritage, and there's a sentimental feeling of a simpler way of life, wholesome, and a lot of common sense wisdom. I think a lot of these island folks have that we can take a lesson from.
So as you look at the way that the folks who lived on the islands retreated from the islands because of the storms and erosion and what have you, what do we know about how they came, about where they went, and how they settled and how they adjusted?
Most seem to have settled in Willis Wharf, so other little seaside towns, Waterways, Oyster, Virginia, and were able to continue on. If they were in the seafood business over there, they just did it out of those towns. So there was not an exodus off of the eastern shore out of Virginia. They really did migrate over there and are established there.
It makes you wonder, though, whether culturally there's a difference between living out there in a barrier-style island as opposed to living on more what you might think of as mainland. You know, it kind of makes you wonder whether there's some sort of cultural reality about that's different.
And Iris Clemente, one of the people in our island home, and she touches on that about there used to be a stigma somewhat for being an island folk.
Oh, really? How so?
She said they had a different way of talking. They were seen as perhaps, she said, lazy, but once they, over the years, they were realized that they were accepted into the community. They were far from it. They were good folks, and so they melded in very well.
Well, it's a very, very interesting study. So if we wanted to come to the Barrier Island exhibit, where is it and how would we get there?
The Barrier Island Center is in Machipungo, Virginia, which is on the eastern shore. We're about 20 miles north of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, or right off on 13 in a pretty white building on the left.
That's nice. How did you get involved in that?
I'm the education director there. I was a former elementary teacher, and went back and took this wonderful job, continuing to educate in a different way.
Yeah, indeed so. And so, that anytime you get over the eastern shore, it's just a nice day. That's just, there's so much going on over there, and there's charming towns and communities, and so you can make that part of a great day. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Sally Dickinson. Congratulations.
Thank you, Kathy.
Are you going to do another production now? So you were sort of a curator, then you became this co-producer. Is there a big wide world for you?
I hope so. Jim Spione, the filmmaker, we cannot let his talent go away, so we'll work on something.
And Kat Moon, how about you? What's next?
I'm working on another series that is about more stories about the Chesapeake Bay and being good stewards of the earth.
And Christy Everett, how about you for Chesapeake Bay Foundation?
Lots more work to do. Yeah. We need a lot of people to help spread the word that we need to clean this bay up, and we can do it. We just need to
get to it.
Get to it.
Yeah. Well, we'll be back in just a moment with a final thought. The story of the restoration of the blue crab in the Chesapeake Bay shows what can happen when people, government, and the private sector come together to make something happen. The crab population was in peril, but thanks to the establishment of some very aggressive limits on the harvest, the blue crab is back better than it's been in decades. So good that we don't have enough picking houses anymore to handle them. For oysters, it's a good news, bad news situation. The problem for oysters is disease, and scientists haven't figured out yet how to resolve that issue in open water. But in fresh water, in controlled habitats, oysters are going gangbusters, being tended along riverbanks throughout Hampton Roads by people just like you. And it's just this kind of citizen-driven aquaculture that some say could kickstart a recovery that could leave the Gulf even better off than it was before the oil spill. They've been rebuilding lost oyster reefs at the rate of about a mile a year along the Alabama coast. Now, at that rate, it'll take about a century to recover what was lost. But if Gulf residents ramp up to 20 to 30 miles of reef a year, the Nature Conservancy reports it's possible to complete 100 miles of oyster reef and 1,000 acres of seagrass and marsh within 3 to 5 years. If that's what could happen in the oil-stained Gulf, imagine what could happen if we got aggressive about oyster reefs in Hampton Roads. It's one case where it really makes sense to go back to the future. You can watch any one of our programs online at whatmatters.tv. And while you're there, why not tell us what you think? You can also sign up for our weekly newsletter so we can let you know what we have in the works here on What Matters. And for more local talk, I hope you'll join us on the radio dial for Hearsay. That's every weekday, noon to 1 from 89.5 WHRV Public Radio for Hampton Roads. And on that program, we take your calls as well. I'm Kathy Lewis. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. And we'll see you next time for another look at What Matters.